Hey, hello. I am Stephen Casimiro. I am one of the three heads of your three-headed host conglomeration here on the Adventure Journal podcast, where today we are talking about something that we talk about incessantly on our own, which is cars, trucks, vehicles for camping. With me is Justin Hausman, checking in from Marin, where it is raining yet again.
And I just realized that my soft topper shell is down, which means it's going to get soaked in the rain. Oh well.
It will join your cot in your platform tent.
It'll be fine, but I should have put the rain cover on yesterday. I was a little optimistic about the weather today.
Yes. And also with us today is Jackson, no relation Casimiro, our producer and
chief spreadsheet officer.
chief spreadsheet officer. So here we are, the three of us. I just got back from doing the Ruta del Jefe bike festival. It's a non-compete social ride down in a very cool, I guess you could call it ecological preserve in Sonora, Mexico. And just had a blast, drove a long way from Southern California. I was not the furthest out participant. There were people from Portland. At least one or two people came from Bozeman. So somebody from Boulder. So people came a long ass way for it. It was really cool. But germane to our discussion today, in the camping area, I pulled in and the three vehicles in a row. There was my Lexus GX470, which is known globally as a Toyota Prado. It slots in size kind of basically between a Land Cruiser and a 4Runner, if you're not familiar with it. Toyota does not do a version of it in the States. I have the first generation. It's a 2007, and then they changed in 2010 now as a GX460, and it has that big, hideous, ugly Lexus grille. Then next to me was a ginormous F-150. I didn't realize quite how long they were. It sort of looked like an oil tanker in length, but they had a full decked tool thing right behind the cab, and then they still had room for the bike to fit lengthwise. And then on the other side of them were my new friends, Carl and Eva, who had came down from Tucson in a Crosstrek. So there in a space of less than 50 yards, we had three very different approaches to your mobile adventure base camp. We had me in kind of a traditional four-wheel drive SUV. We had the giant pickup truck. And then we had what is a really sort of moxie-laden little compact.
Mm-hmm. Each with your bowls of porridge? Is that it from the Three Bears?
Pretty much. And I was the Goldilocks right in the middle.
I was saying, which one do you think is just right? Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah.
Well, I slept inside my truck, and when it rained and when we had the big windstorm, I was quite happy. I just closed my vent windows so I didn't get wet. And then my compatriots, I just watched as one was in a Nemo and one was a Big Agnes, and the tents held up well, but man, they were flapping.
Well, at least the truck didn't have a giant camper shell on it. I mean, that's fine. I know people love those. It's fine, but I always feel like, if you saw our soft topper review, you may as well just have an SUV at that point. Like, the nice thing about having the truck is being able to sleep in the bed. I wish they weren't.
That punctured my kind of 6 to 8 month pickup truck obsession was when we shot that video. Jackson shot it and edited. Justin was the star, showing off his. He has a Nissan
the Frontier was the star.
Well, the Frontier was the star. Was when you said, it's tiny in the back, and it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't drive as well as an SUV. So I'm like, but I have obsessed over my vehicle for years from numerous different angles, and I'm guessing you probably have too. I've looked at it from a capability standpoint, from a cargo hauling standpoint, from a whether I sleep inside or not standpoint, from miles per gallon, environmental considerations, all that. And I actually came away from this trip there. I mean, basically there was every kind of vehicle you could imagine down there. I mean, people had camper vans, transits, a sportsmobile. I saw somebody with a scout camper. And I came away feeling like, for me, except for the lousy gas mileage, I'm in the perfect vehicle for me. It drives great. It'll go anywhere. It's adaptable. The seats come in and out. It will take 7 adults comfortably, or I can sleep inside with my bike inside and quite comfortable. But that's me. So why don't you guys tell everybody what you're driving and kind of your thoughts behind that, and then we'll start to unpack like what makes a perfect adventure vehicle, if there is such a thing.
Well, I'll start, but I also want everyone to know that Steven and I talk pretty much every day on the phone, and I would say 90% of the times that we do talk, we talk about vehicles and how he's thinking about getting something different, or saying that he's really recently rediscovered his love for the Lexus. So this is something that we are constantly debating, as if there was a right answer, even though we know there's not. We'll talk about that. Well, actually, there is a right answer. We'll get to that later on. But it's always interesting to hear like which side of the spectrum he's on right now. But I think obviously you still have the Lexus, so that's probably the one.
I do. And you know what? We need to address later the idea of optimization culture, because I think that's kind of the cancer at the heart of this. Mm-hmm. The idea that there is this perfect thing and that you can somehow optimize until you reach that point.
Yeah.
That's driving a lot of my when I'm dissatisfied, that's what's driving that. But so yeah, go on, Justin. Sorry.
So I have gone through pretty much every option you could have over in the last, 10, 12 years. Maybe not every option. I've never had a van. But I'm rolling with a 2016 Nissan Frontier. It's the SV. I don't know what that stands for. I think it's like the mid-tier level, 4-wheel drive, which I never in a million years thought I would have something like this. I had a Tacoma a few years ago. I've had lots of Toyota trucks, all 2-wheel drive. This is actually the first 4-wheel drive pickup I've ever had. But I've had a few Toyota pickups, never really looked at Nissans. Always thought they looked kind of funky. I always thought they looked like grandpa trucks. And I actually test drove a Frontier probably in like 2019, 2018. Maybe it was before that when I got my Tacoma that I had before and hated it. I just didn't like how it drove. I didn't like how it looked. But I don't know, something switched, and a couple years back I sold my Outback, which I didn't need anymore since we already have a RAV4 at the house and didn't need 2 all-wheel drive crossover type vehicles. Bought the Frontier, and at this point I feel like I have the perfect adventure vehicle, at least for me. I don't think I'll go back to not having a pickup anymore. It's so useful for all the things that I want to do, and I haul a lot of big things around, big surfboards, stand-up paddle boards, bikes, that sort of stuff. So I need that bed where I can just throw things in the back and not really think much about it. So I couldn't be happier. It gets the worst gas mileage you could possibly imagine, but I like how it's just nondescript. It's just kind of a silver truck. I don't have stickers on it. I don't have any like garish overlanding stuff other than big tires. So it's kind of ideal, and I'm really happy with it at this point. But I mean, we could easily do this again in a year, and I'll be telling everybody about how I have like a 98 Volkswagen Beetle, and how I've decided that's the best adventure vehicle. So who knows?
Porsche 911 lifted.
Well, yeah, Safari Porsche is pretty cool, but I'm pretty stoked on the truck. But I get why you wouldn't want one, but I'm pretty stoked on it.
Okay, well, I have a pretty different perspective. I mean, growing up, I wanted to be a car designer. I wanted to go into industrial design, and I just had this encyclopedic knowledge of all different types of cars. Never really into the mechanical side, but really on the design side and functionality side. I was obsessed with our first gen Sequoia growing up. Still a legendary car. And, flash forward a bit, I had a crossover, and then I was kind of getting more into overlanding and got what I have now, which is a 2015 4Runner Trail 4-wheel drive. It's basically an SR5 with a rear locker. And flash forward a little bit more, and my relationship to cars has changed really dramatically. Most people like us would probably still admit to how problematic cars are in cities. There's huge cost to society because of cars.
Yes.
And it's not, I don't want to make the discussion about this because I still love cars. And in fact, using cars for adventure is actually what they're best at.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my feelings against cars are really about their use in cities where we should have other options available to us. And I know that we don't have great options. I want less car dependence in cities. And meanwhile, I still want a capable car for adventure. But for me, the next car I get will be much smaller, much more fuel efficient, while trying to retain some of the capability. And I mentioned on the show before, my interest is to get something pretty small with maybe like a bike rack and a rooftop box to kind of make it a little more modular. So that's kind of where I am now. No hate to cars for adventure. I think that overlanding is actually a valid use of cars, kind of unlike, I live in LA, just all the traffic in the city. It's not the best way to get around.
I'd go insane driving a 4Runner in LA traffic all the time. I mean, I get it.
Me and my partner have a 4Runner and a Prius, which
Yeah.
is a pretty killer combo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess all three of us have that, right? All three of us have like a gas guzzling adventure rig and then a much more sensible fuel efficient thing for around town.
Well, yeah. So, if you have ever wondered whether we read comments or emails or whatever, yeah, a few years ago, I wrote a piece about struggling, with guilt over driving a gas rig and trying to figure out what's the best solution. And AJ reader left a comment and said, I bought a Tesla Model 3 and, we share that. And then I've got my Jeep or Wrangler or whatever it was. And that, for the first time, I actually had never thought about a Tesla. And so my wife and I went and drove it and we loved it. And it qualified for the 7,500. And then California kicked in like another $2,000. And it was, I mean, I think that the sticker at the time was the 37 or it was close to 40. So, I mean, in the end, we got this really nice EV for like $30,000. And $30,000 is a lot of money, but like not for cars anymore. And so, what we did is we changed how we approached the vehicles. Before we were like, this is just such an American way of doing things. Like she had her car, I had my car, and, we never drove each other's cars. And that was kind of silly because we share everything. We're married. Yeah. So we share the Tesla, we share the Model 3 and it's been great. And then, as like you, Justin, I don't really use the Lexus unless I'm going to have an adventure.
Yeah.
I go out of my way to wait so I can use the EV. Jackson's a little different situation. They, each of them does have their own cars and, she has a 9-to-5 job. It's a little bit different, but it is the same idea, very high mileage and then, a very adventure specific rig.
Yeah, I just did my mileage calculation for the year, and I put about 4,800 miles on my truck last year. I think that's right. And the year before was about the same. And I'm in a I have a very particularly great situation, which is that I work from home and I live in a small town where you can walk to everything. And so I don't really drive that much anyway. With my wife's car, we use to like ferry the kids around, but we'll go camping and stuff in it. We have a 2017 RAV4 hybrid as well. But, I am in the fortunate situation to where I can really only use my truck for truck stuff. And I don't think I would own it otherwise. Like if I was in Jackson's situation, there's no way. I'd have a Subaru still, which is what I had in the city. So before I got the truck, I lived in San Francisco for 12 years, and I had an Outback, which I wrote about a bunch at AJ that I lifted and armored the bottom, and it was absolutely the most capable thing I could possibly imagine you could turn a crossover into, and absolutely, I still love that. I still miss it. I loved that car, but didn't really need it with another all-wheel drive crossover, and I do need a truck bed. So, I will echo everything that Jackson is saying. I'm very much a war on cars guy. If you were, for whatever reason, active in Marin County social media stuff, you'd see me every day just blasting county officials for not having more bike-friendly policies. And I ride a bike everywhere I go up here, and I despise the idea of there being cars in cities, generally speaking. And so, I completely understand where Jackson's coming from. But if you're in the position to where you can have a vehicle that is very use case specific, like a truck or big SUV that has 4-wheel drive or something like that really ticks all the boxes. What's interesting though is that I will say, as much as I love the truck, it's not like I have more fun camping or more, I don't, it hasn't, I mean, I like having it, but I don't do things that I couldn't have done with the Subaru. I mean, it's nice to be able to sleep in the bed, but,
for it's, if I recall, like you just got the itch for a pickup truck.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, one day you just were picturing yourself leaning against a pickup truck or sitting on the tailgate,
that's
and
true.
then a week later, I think it was, you'd bought it. Like it was an itch that you had to scratch.
And that I don't know if you guys have that, but that happens. I swear to God, every like 5 to 10 years, if I don't own one, I'll turn to my wife and go, should I have a truck again? It just sort of happens. Before this, I had a 2012 Tacoma that was a pre-runner, so 2-wheel drive, that I built out with a cool sleeping platform in the bed and a camper shell, and that thing was great. Before that, I had 2 old school compact Toyota pickup trucks with shells, and that I messed around on the inside, customizing them for basically just surf transport. And I slept in the back of those things everywhere. I mean, took them all over California, up to Oregon, down to Mexico. Slept on the on the corrugated metal of the bed with like just a mat on it. Like two people at a time. Like no issues at all with those things. They were great. Which is funny because it's like, I could easily talk myself into a Sprinter, or I could easily talk myself into some like full size truck that's really built out. But I also, in the back of my head, know I would also be just fine with a 1993 Toyota compact 2-wheel drive pickup truck, and that would do everything I ever needed to do.
So before we get too into the weeds on things, let's take a step back here, because I think that the prompt for the discussion is what's the perfect adventure vehicle. And so I think that we need to, and everybody has a different case, right? So it's a very personal thing. But let's talk about the elements that are important to us. So, I mean, I've had the sort of polar extremes in reliability. I've had, Toyotas for a long time. I've also had a Vanagon. So Jackson, what do you think are the most important elements of a vehicle for you for adventure? The qualities.
So really, as it stands now, I have everything I could want in terms of off-road capability. But moving into the future, I moved back to just a simple ground tent system, and most of my ambitions moving forward are more day hikes, backpacking, and bike packing. I mean, I'm still down to car camp, but really only as an extension of like a pretty minimal backpacking style setup. I've always been a comparative minimalist when I've camped with other outdoors people. And so for me, this is not going to apply to everybody at all, but I'm just after something much more fuel efficient and smaller, because I want a better car to drive around the city that's physically smaller, maybe with one of those modular components, a roof box or a bike rack.
Yeah.
35 mpg the minimum, but I get 17 now. I would prefer it to be more like 45. All-wheel drive for sure, but everything else on the like off-road capability I think is negotiable, because for me, I just want to get to the trailheads more or less.
Yeah.
I actually looked. I had been saying, oh, maybe we'll be a one-car household. And I was looking at buses, but like shuttles to outdoors, because it feels like for if I live in Portland and go to Mount Hood, there's a shuttle around Mount Hood, and there's so much you could do right there. And there is a huge lack of like trains or buses with like decent, affordable, decent prices. The closest I found, you can actually go from Vegas to like Zion for like $100 each way, which is still, expensive, especially that's per person. So maybe my ideal adventure car is no car, maybe it's a bike, but for me, for the future, it's just going to be something more or less just a car-shaped thing that sends power to 4 wheels.
Well, that's you bring up a good. Well, you didn't really bring up this point, but I mean it made me think of the option of renting stuff, which is something that I like. Every time I'm talking to like, I don't know what I get. I think people are just bored, generally speaking. But like my neighbors, we're always talking about getting. Well, what do you think? What do you think about that new truck that just came out? What do you think about the new SUV that came out? We're always thinking about there's like the one solution here, and somebody will ultimately bring up, well, why don't it's crazy to spend 50 grand on a brand new 4Runner or something when you could just rent one the 3 times a year that you need it, or like in the wintertime here, that's a big issue where a lot of people here ski, and so everyone's going to Tahoe, and it's a lot of people here have 4-wheel drive trucks with all-terrain or snow tires on them that they only need for the 4 times they go to Tahoe, and that's their daily driver.
Yeah.
And we all kind of think, gosh, I could just rent a truck the few times a year I want to go out on these fishing spots. I know I need to drive on a dirt road for 10 miles, but I don't, and I don't know why that is. I don't know.
Nobody does that because it's because the inertia, the inertia of your existing life. I mean, Joni and I have talked about this too. We've talked about this with, all kinds of things. My friend Sinway and I, we did the math on owning a Sprinter versus renting one.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
Like if you used your Sprinter 2 weeks a year, which people with Sprinters probably use them more, but most people take 2 weeks vacation a year. It would take something like, I forget what we calculated, like you could rent one, like it would take you 3 years of 2 weeks a year use before you start to make your money back on it. But you don't. I mean, there's camper vans that we can rent all over the place but you don't do it. And people,
because you want to be able to just walk out your door at any given point and just go somewhere, I guess. Or it's the personalization aspect. I don't really know what it is. I wrote an article for AJ a while back about like a poll question, maybe like, would you rent gear generally speaking? I thought people would say no. We got a lot. I think the majority were, yeah, I absolutely would rent gear. But I don't think I applied that to vehicles too. But it's got to just be the personalization aspect or the total freedom of being able to go whenever you want. I'm not sure.
But that's weighed against the enormous burden of parking, storing, insuring.
Yeah.
A car comes with a lot of burden. But I mean, just to put a pin on where I'm at, I mean, I mentioned the spreadsheet. I do have an enormous spreadsheet of electric and plug-in and hybrids. I think my top contenders are probably a Prius, the new Prius that looks super cool, or a Crosstrek, something along those lines. I mean, I think the CRV hybrid is pretty cool. That has a 50-50 power distribution. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
What about you, Justin?
So I wrote it down while you guys were talking. I think for me, if I for whatever reason the truck was gone and I'm starting from scratch, or if I'm just thinking about what's coming next, to me the priority is ground clearance, because for the only, like, I can, if I'm not going dispersed camping for the most part, or fishing, everything else I do is just like bringing surfboards to the beach or something. I can do that in any car that has adequate space. But for what I actually want an adventure vehicle to do, it's going to be a lot of Forest Service road driving, a lot of fire road driving. So for me, ground clearance is number one. There's it has to have at least 8 inches of ground clearance, or I'm not even going to consider it. 2 would probably be storage. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to take a sedan somewhere, even if there was some kind of beefed up sedan that had a bunch of ground clearance. I'm not going to use that because the storage would suck. So storage is huge. So I'm, SUV, truck, or like a wagon type thing. 3rd would be 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. You can do 90% of the things that I like to do without 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. The only real issue is that the back of your mind, you always wonder, like, could I go further, or am I going to get stuck, or something like that. And it's worth it to me, and we could talk about this later if we want, but it's worth it to me to sacrifice the fuel economy and the added mechanical expense to just silence that voice. The whole time I had a pre-runner Tacoma, every time I got somewhere super gnarly, I was like, okay, I can kind of handle this, but I was worried about it. So, but that's still less important than ground clearance and storage. You can do a lot with a 2-wheel drive vehicle that has adequate storage space. And to me, the 4th most important thing would be livability. I don't sleep in my vehicles. I like the opportunity. That's cool. But, if it's I wouldn't want something that's just a pain in the butt to drive. So like, I don't really want that's why I don't have a full size truck, even though I could have way more space and get the same gas mileage. It's a pain in the butt to park even a compact truck, or what we call compact trucks, which are relatively large compared to what they were 30 years ago. But my Frontier barely fits adequately in parking lots and stuff as it is. So I wouldn't want anything bigger. So for me, livability is on there as well. Okay. But those are the things I look for.
All right. My number 1 is reliability. Everybody knows about range anxiety, but I mean, I had just reliability anxiety when I drove the Syncro. I had a Volkswagen 4-wheel drive camper van for
PTSD with that
8
thing,
or
I
9
would
years.
think.
Yeah, I feel like I joke that I'm a recovering Vanagon owner, because I mean, I have a lot of pictures of that thing on flatbeds, and I was coming back from Outdoor Retailer in Salt Lake, and I was decided to, on the way home, take a diversion and go through the mountains and Forest Service roads. And I remember taking a nap. I love outdoor naps. And I was so worried that it wouldn't restart that I took a nap with the engine running.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I felt like I was in an abusive relationship, and not to diminish the horror of real abusive relationships, but like I just didn't ever know what I was going to do. So reliability is number one. Off-road capability is number two. And for me, that includes four-wheel drive. It includes ground clearance, but it also includes ruggedness, right? And I watched you building your Outback, and you put skid plates and other things, these steel plates that just, the point of the Outback is to have a capable vehicle that has decent mileage. You might as well try it, have an SUV. Otherwise, that was sort of my approach to it, because in making it more off-road capable, I felt like you diminish what that was. I'd rather buy something, even though I've recently almost bought an Outback for the mileage. I think they're great vehicles. I think that just having something kind of factory ready, stock, because and also okay, so I don't want to get too off. Tires are critical. I mean, I think even like two-wheel drive and beefier tires would be better than four-wheel drive and tires
no doubt.
with sidewalls that you have to worry about. And then finally, for me, is it has to be a certain size. Like, I've looked at smaller vehicles, and even though my kids are grown, we still do family trips, we're carrying food and extra coolers. I recently bought a very small Airstream, so I've never towed anything before, but now having to tow something, that's an issue. But unlike you guys, I really want to sleep inside. And it's not so much about sleeping inside as it is about kind of simplifying the process for me. The LX is big enough with the 60% of the middle seats taken out. I can fit my X-Ped Mega Mat fully stretched out, incredibly comfortable. I just did this when I was in Mexico with my big full suspension bike next to me and still sleep comfortably. Nothing hanging off the back, no bike rack, no box, nothing. I feel like I can do it. I can sleep. I have done this in neighborhoods, in parking lots, in a Walmart parking lot. I feel like the way that my rig is set up, and that's one of the things about like a pickup and a camper, like you're not stealth. And even a van, often people are kind of look dubious at vans. I have window tint on my back windows, and so I can sleep in the back really comfortably and really stealthily and not draw attention to myself. So, and then, I mean, it sounds crazy when we're talking about the difference between 14 miles per gallon or 16 miles per gallon or whatever, but like what my rig gets a little bit better gas mileage than a 4Runner, not much, a mile or two. But as I've thought about other newer vehicles with more safety features, lane assist and stuff like that, which would be great to have, and better mileage. I mean, I think that I've found kind of the sweet spot and affordability. I mean, the thing is, like, you guys both you didn't spend a lot, but like you spent way more than I did. I bought my GX 4 years ago in 2020, and it was $13,500.
That's all you paid for that?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know that.
So I have this super comfortable, the leather on my seat is splitting and stuff like that, but it's a Lexus.
Right.
It's incredibly comfortable. It's incredibly quiet. It has adjustable suspension. It has air suspension. I can lift it or lower it. It drives amazingly. And it was $13,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I paid 10 grand more than that. So, yeah.
Well, that seems like a good place to take a break. We will be right back. You love adventure, we love adventure, and that is why we created Adventure Journal in print. It is the gift that we've made for ourselves and for our friends, and hopefully for you, that is analog, that gets away from screens, that gives you some of the most interesting, deepest, and thoughtful stories from some of the best writers and photographers working in the outdoor space. We do 4 a year. You get free shipping and a deep discount. It's $60 to have this absolutely beautiful, no batteries necessary celebration of adventure in your mailbox. Get it at adventure-journal.com. I am drinking, it's gotten cold now because we're halfway through the show. I am drinking Long Weekend Coffee. We launched Long Weekend Coffee earlier this year to bring you and us blends that are not fussy, that will take any kind of brew method that we like, whether it's at home, in a cabin, on the tailgate of a truck, doesn't matter. We have 4 blends. We have dark, medium, espresso roast, and a decaf. I think they're pretty amazing. I guarantee you will like them. Check us out at longweekend.coffee. Welcome back. You can hit pause if you want to go ahead and subscribe to Adventure Journal after my really compelling pitch, or order your Long Weekend Coffee, which is amazing. We'll still be here waiting for you when you come back. So feel free to do that. Okay, now that you have done that, welcome back. And we have not really talked about vans yet. And I think I'm the only one. I know Jackson hasn't had a van, although me Vanna is his Vanna. So apologies to Vanna White and to people who hate puns everywhere. I had a van again. My obsession started with vans. This was way before van life. I just have to say, this was way before van life.
You found it. You created van life, didn't you? You and Foster?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to brag, but yes, I did. My first taste of van life was with sportsmobiles. And I got to borrow sportsmobiles, a total of 3 for stories.
So wait, just real quick. These are the Ford Econoline 150.
Yeah, so Sportsmobile is a conversion company. Yeah, they're a conversion company, and they typically took basically naked Ford vans, diesels from the factory, and then just upfitted everything on them.
They look extremely badass. Usually, I think
they are, but man, the diesels are loud. They are not subtle. They're sort of the cyber trucks of their day in terms of van. Like I pulled into a campground near Mount Shasta at like midnight on a Friday night, driving one of those things, and I think I woke everybody up just idling.
I think you woke me up, and I don't even know. I was probably not within 1,000 miles.
You're probably in Central California.
That night you couldn't sleep. That was what it was.
That was it. That was me in the Sportsmobile. Which with this particular one that I had, it was a loaner from Sportsmobile, and it was garishly yellow with this just garish like NASCAR thing on the side that said "Adventure Van" or something like it. It was just like so mortifying.
Why do they do that? Like, do they think you are gonna forget, or this is a selling point that when you're renting these things?
I don't know, but I was driving around Mount Shasta for a couple of weeks, and I was kind of hanging with my friends, the cars who run Mount Shasta mountain guides, and she, when I sort of rolled up, she's like, "Oh my God, I've been hearing about this van. Like people around town were talking about it." It was mortifying. But okay, so like one of the things, so I have this theory that one of the booms behind overlanding is because people love to nest. I know this from, 15, however long we've been doing Adventure Journal and writing about weekend cabins, that people obsess about cabins. We have this craving for really cool shelter. And I mean, this even goes back to like making blanket forts and tree forts and things like that. And I think the part of that is that's the idea behind this boom in van life. I mean, there's something that's just so satisfying about being tiny homed, self-contained, ship shape, right? Like this term ship shape, from people, and everything's like tight and tidy on their boat. There's a real satisfaction that comes with that. And it's much harder to do that in an SUV or a Crosstrek than it is a van. And so sportsmobiles, though, even back then they were like $80,000, which was, like, I mean, it's just, there was no way that I could afford it. And so I and then I met some friends kind of near Zion, and they had mutual friends. They had other friends that came, and they showed up in this van again. And I had no idea that there was a 4-wheel drive version. And so I became obsessed with this VW Synchro van and eventually bought one. And it was incredible. Like, I mean, it was one of my favorite vehicles to drive. It didn't drive great. It actually drove well, but it wasn't like comfortable. It was just fun. It was just as retro feeling and wonderful as you would think. And it was surprisingly small inside, but also surprisingly comfortable. And if it weren't for the complete unreliability of it, I would still have it today. But eventually I had a Subaru engine in it, and the wiring harness died, and it took me the better part of a year to track one down from a junkyard in Canada, to then have that customized and put in. And so like there are parts like the power window actuators that you just can't, I went through 3 of them. You just can't get them anymore. So vans are pretty amazing. And I'm curious now, Jackson, we did trips when you were a kid in it, and Justin, you haven't had one. So I'm curious your guys' perspective on van life and your take on it.
I mean, when we borrowed those sportsmobiles, that was like a canonical event in my childhood. Having those out front, it was just the best clubhouse. It was so much fun.
You must have been so stoked to see that thing outside.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my more recent interest, like prior to buying the 4Runner, was they're just better packaged. They're just the shape of them is a more compact, more space efficient. You just get more volume out of it.
Out of a van.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. The whole engine compartment is structured really differently. I mean, obviously the van against the rear engine. But when I was looking, it wasn't to do a build out, which is more what you're talking about. I did see some really cool build outs of the Transit Connect, which
those are the little ones. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a quick obituary for it. They discontinued them, and it's it's such a shame. They were never all-wheel drive, but it was just, you basically got 100 cubic feet or more in this very crossover-sized little thing, and people would build really cool build-outs that were way more Vanagon sized, because anything now that's Vanagon sized is a minivan, and everything else is bigger. The Transit Connect is where or the normal Transit is where you have to go now.
Yeah, well, because minivans are luxury items as well. I mean, I don't think you can get a minivan for less than like 55, 60 grand at this point. They're all like super nice.
Yeah. But even if you weren't going to do a build out, which this is what I wanted to bring you in on, Justin. I know your family is growing and you want something larger.
Yeah.
So I know that you have the Nissan, but I was really into this Sienna Woodland.
Is that the new trim level they make?
Yeah, so they made a trim. So they did a refresh of the Sienna, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. It only comes in a hybrid. It's 35 mpg.
Yeah.
The Woodland gives you 7 inches of ground clearance.
Huh.
Roof rack.
Look it up while I'm talking to you right now.
1500 watt inverter.
Really?
Yeah, because it
sounds like it's about $80,000.
Yeah, it's like 50. But okay, so here's the main thing. If you're not going to do a build out, I'm bringing the Vanagon in. I'm bringing all these pieces together. Okay. Yeah. So in the Sienna, the middle captain seats can slide all the way forward. The third row drops completely flat into the floor, 6 feet.
Yeah, that's a lot of space.
6 feet behind the middle row when it's compacted. So you could sleep there. But here's the thing, those middle captain chairs also slide so far back that you could basically have a Vanagon style,
like in the middle
row, where you could have all the space in front of you, so you could sit, do a little table, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. I've seen some really. These are just too nice. These are just way too nice. My kids would ruin this in 5 seconds. I've thought about like I've seen some really cool off wheel or like all wheel drive Siennas like lifted, like built out pretty neat, and like they draw your eye. I mean, it's such a pretty sweet looking vehicle, but my wife and I rented a van in New Zealand a couple years back, and we had it for like 3 weeks, and I really liked everything that you guys are describing. I think my issue is that like I don't want to sleep like where I'm cooking. Like I just don't like. I feel like there's like smells in there that are contained. I prefer.
We're not going to pursue that avenue. But.
I just would rather. I like having like my cooking area in one place, my sleeping area in another place. I mean, I love the coziness factor. I get all of that. I totally do, but I don't. I feel like when I was driving around with a van, you know, I can hear stuff clanking around behind me. Like it's just nice having that section completely removed from my driving section. The other thing about a van, like, for me, it would need to be this like Mad Max level burly rad Sienna to do it. I aesthetically, I just don't think I could swallow a minivan. I mean, I could handle a Transit or something like that, but I will say right now, I will give up a lot of capability for aesthetics, and because I have to enjoy my vehicle. Like I want to look back at it and be like, that thing looks sweet.
Yes.
Like every time
Which
I come
you did
back
with your Outback.
I did.
know you
that
were
thing
constantly
was
looking
sweet.
back. And I did that with the van again. Like
yeah,
I would just sit and stare at it.
Yeah,
because it was just so pretty.
I take pictures of my truck all the time. You know, I'll be like coming back from a trailhead and I can see it, and I'm like, oh, look at that thing. I'm so glad that's there. And I don't think I would do that with a minivan unless it was like super dialed and like really special.
Okay. I want to talk about build outs, okay? Because I think, you know, we're talking about perfect adventure vehicles. And I don't think, as a spoiler alert, that we're all going to agree that perfect adventure vehicle is the one that you have, right? Like they just use it. And I have often cited my friends Michael and Megan, who do Fresh Off the Grid, and they spent at least 2 years living out of a sedan, and Michael is like 6'7" or some. Wow. He's absurdly long, and they made it happen. So I'm with you on the cooking thing, and I would say 999 times out of the 1,000 times that something was made in that van, it was coffee. Because we would just take a 2-burner stove. I did not want to cook inside the van, you know, unless it was raining. And if I were to ever have another VW van, I wouldn't get the full camper because you've got all these heavy cabinets and storage space. And I would just get the weekender version, you know, which basically has a bed. And, you know, all of this stuff that you build out, it adds weight, it adds complexity, it reduces drivability, it reduces braking distance. It affects the handling, all of those things for comfort.
Yeah.
And I think about this often when I see things dangling off of trucks, you know, like you've got your Max Tracks and you've got your high lift jack, and you sort of have all of those things, which is fine, to each their own. But, you know, my approach, and again, you know, one of the reasons why I like to sleep in my truck is simplicity. Right? Like I don't need a bed platform in my truck. I just need a flat place to throw my mat. Because then if, you know, there's 7 adults that we want to go somewhere and we're going to do it on my truck, we can easily do it. So Jackson, on the other hand, has added drawers to his 4Runner primarily for security because, you know, when he carries his camera kit. So I would love to hear your take on building versus just bare space and modularity.
Yeah, I mean, modularity would be such a great. It's relevant to adventure. I mean, let's say I want to put 2 bikes in my 4Runner so that my partner and I can go bike somewhere together. It's pretty tough with the drawer, but when I'm working out of the car and I have all my stuff super organized in this drawer system, and there's not boxes on top of boxes, which was my experience for a long time, was that the space just wasn't broken up enough that everything was just piled on top of itself, because I would fill up pretty much the entire car full of stuff, and without that level of build out, it just felt like I had to remove everything from the car, and then I just wasn't as mobile. I would have to repack the car if we were going to go move down the road, and so that wasn't the best experience either. You know, I think that your soft topper is super cool, Justin. I think that that's a good compromise on modularity because, yeah, sometimes maybe your adventure looks like putting a couple bikes in, or the other realities of being a truck person, moving furniture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gone from having a wooden build out that I did for my Tacoma, which was like really well thought out, still pretty easy to take in and out, not that easy. But what I've come around to is I worry about organization in the totes and the bins that I have all my stuff in. So like my garage is organized, my boxes are organized for stuff, but I prefer to keep that out of the truck. Like at this point now, I mean my all I have is that soft topper on there, and that's it. So like when it's time to go somewhere, I throw the bins in the back, but I know where they are. I know what's in them. I don't have to think about it. And to me, I've arrived at that level of I guess non-modularity really, because I like to be able to use my truck for truck stuff. And so to me, when you put on big racks and you put on a rooftop tent, you put on all these other things, now you've lost that ability right there. And I don't like permanence of building things into the vehicle, which is another reason like the van thing wouldn't really work for me, because if I got one, I would immediately start putting in places where here's where I'll hang the surfboards and here's where this goes and that sort of stuff, which that's fine. If I had if I had an infinite amount of vehicles, that I'd probably have a van that was all built out for that sort of thing too. But I just love being able to have the bare bed of the truck, just throw stuff in when I need. I always used to sleep on a cot. I just got this new sleeping platform that you can throw in and take out really easily from Pacific Adventure Works. I haven't used it yet, but I mean, it looks pretty sturdy, looks pretty cool. So I can have a little sleeping platform that takes me 30 seconds to set up. And to me, that's the goal. That's the dream, because then I have what I need to camp when I need it, and I don't have it when I don't need it, and it's just a lot easier for me.
I also should say that, Justin and I, for both of us, this is our job, right? Thinking about this stuff, trying new things. I can always justify because it's tax deductible.
Okay.
I mean,
Totally.
So there's, I don't think that I would be so, I know that I wouldn't be so eager to change and try different things if it weren't my job.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
You know, I would just be like, okay, this is where I am. I wouldn't be shifting around. As you were just talking about racks, I was thinking, okay, well, I have a front runner rack for my GX, and it's an amazing rack. Like it's incredible. And I wrote a story about it. I love it. I don't have it on right now. I just went back to the factory rack. And one of the reasons was because I think it was last year, Jackson, then we went to Yosemite and it snowed on us in the spring. And I can remember, and I had the Wolfpack boxes, and I had one of the Pelican overlanding boxes. And of course I had locks on everything because I wanted to be able to leave the rig. And I think the Pelican had 4 latches on it, and it's snowing, and I'm trying to get things off the roof, and I'm fiddling with, these cold locks and keys and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, this looks great. It looks super butch, but this is a pain in the ass. And if you like that, that's great. If you want to, have your modular box, but I'm actively looking right now at a Yakima box, at a big cargo box, because I kind of foolishly sold mine to Justin, who then sold it because it wasn't big enough. And, I like the idea of one key, everything in there. I don't currently have a high lift jack. I think they're kind of dangerous. And I think a scissor, a normal bottle jack
bottle jacks are great.
Is great. But I don't carry max tracks. I can use my floor mats, but whatever. All that stuff can go up in the box, and it makes the inside easier. And then a box, of course, if I someday want to get a Rivian R3X or whatever, then my system still works fine.
Yeah. I mean, I it's funny. I mean, I consider the truck our adventure vehicle, because that's what the family would use if we were going somewhere that was really off the beaten path, or if the snow is really bad. But if we're going camping, we're taking the RAV4, just because the mileage is great. It's way more comfortable for everybody to sit inside. But with our big cargo box, it's pretty roomy in the back too. And then I have from Pack Mule, like a cargo carrier that plugs into the hitch mount or the hitch receiver, that they can take a couple big giant totes, all kinds of stuff back there, and we can haul all kinds of stuff, or a few bikes. Like when we went to Yosemite this winter, it was still pretty warm, so I had 2 bikes on the back, our cargo box full of all of our snow stuff, and then 2 kids inside, and then all of everything else we needed behind them. And that actually ends up being, I mean, in some ways that's more of the adventure vehicle, because it's always an adventure no matter what you're doing when you have 2 little kids. But that thing works great. And because of the extra storage things that you can just throw on there. I mean, that's the thing is, I wrote last week or the week before about the new Rivian R3 looks awesome, but it just makes me think of how much I loved my Honda Fit. I had a 2012 Honda Fit. My wife and I, was our first car we bought together, and you could haul so much stuff in that thing. It was so big. I could lay down on the inside. I could fit a 9.6 surfboard inside that tiny little car.
Wow.
And man, it was cheap. I think it was $16,000 brand new. And we just don't have those anymore. I mean, we were talking. Jackson wanted to bring up the Jimny.
Suzuki
so
there was somebody had a Jimny in Mexico, the Suzuki Jimny,
and safety. I think it's safety reasons that we don't have them here. Like they don't have
excuses,
the safety equipment, I guess, that we require. But these little cheap, super good utilitarian vehicles, it's a nightmare to me that we don't have those here. That's usually what me and my buddies end up talking about, is how annoyed we are that you can't just go buy a stripped down Hilux or something for $20,000. Why I don't need my Toyota Tacoma or my Nissan Frontier to be a $50,000 luxury vehicle. I just need a bare bones thing that
you need an appliance. I mean,
exactly,
something that's not going to be it's the lifestyle. It's this, there's all these marketing dollars. Some of those have made their way to me. But having a vehicle that is stripped down to just the essentials and that is ruggedized enough that you're not really going to worry about it, which very early on in my 4Runner, I just decided this is a work truck and I'm not going to worry too much about scratching it or whatever. It's all ruggedized enough. The plastics are pretty hard and everything, and I just wasn't going to sweat it too much. And I wanted to mention the new Land Cruiser because there's definitely that idea is there where, compared to the outgoing model, it's much more stripped down and much more affordable and less luxurious and more ruggedized. However, it's still expensive.
Still 50-something grand.
Starts
right?
at 56.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it comes
that's
with
a wild amount of money. That's a huge amount of money.
The Jimny, I don't know what it would cost if you imported it or whatever, if that was possible, but in Australian dollars converted to US, it's $20,000 for a Jimny. And yeah, I mean, they're small. Maybe they're more of they're obviously a Wrangler competitor, and we haven't really talked about none of us are Jeep guys doing hard Jeep trails.
Yeah, because of reliability. I don't think I would ever have a Jeep just because of the reliability is number one for me.
Yeah,
and I don't need that level of capability.
Yeah,
right. Not that you can do those in a Land Cruiser or a 4Runner or FJ or something, but yeah, it just feels like we're missing the actual everyman's car workhorse, but also cheap.
I mean, I do kind of feel like that's what I have with the Frontier, sort of. I mean, I paid $22,000 for it at the height of used car shortage. So I probably paid, I'm sure now it wouldn't cost that much. And it had 90,000 miles when I bought it. But it is very analog and very bare bones. And that's part of the charm to me.
This is a really key point, and it's almost impossible to buy a car that is not basically an entertainment center now.
Totally.
And that is not fully computerized. And I think about the cars that have created for themselves these cultures and these fan bases, like the Honda Element. I saw a lot of Honda Elements in Arizona and Mexico.
Awesome.
With the Hotel Element pop top, added to them.
Element, that's what it's called.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of those, and and I think that, I mean, I love having the leather in the Lexus. I love the sound level. I mean, I like those luxuries, but I would much rather be able to get a car for $30,000 that that drove well, that was reliable, that had good ground clearance, that was ruggedized, that I could hose out, and it was just simple. I mean, you look at these, I don't know. I think we were talking. I was talking with Colin True of Rock Fight. I don't know if you, Justin, were on there, and you guys were slagging on the Xterras, but
I like Xterras. It wasn't me. I like Xterras.
Okay, well, see, I still see Xterras around, and I remember when that truck came out, it was $23,000. It was 4-wheel drive. It was very basic. I had a couple Pathfinders back when they were off-roady, and they were great. They worked great for me. And that was, that was a stripped down car. And I mean, even the FJ Cruiser, which some people absolutely despise that vehicle, and it's really weird in a lot of ways, but like that really struck a chord at the time it came out. It was affordable. It was basic. It was plastic on the inside. And we just don't have those options anymore.
I don't know what you would get. Maybe well, I guess the Connect is gone, but like the only thing I can think of that are that level of utilitarian are some of the smaller vans that are clearly made for like fleet use, something like that.
I think the Maverick is not too far off.
Maverick. I keep forgetting about the Maverick. My buddy has one, and I love that thing. I really Colin True has a Maverick.
Right.
Actually,
he was raving. He has the hybrid. He was raving.
He has the
about,
hybrid.
He said he came home from Big Bear. He had so much mileage, so much range production coming downhill. He felt like he had more than when he started.
I like those. Those are very cool. My buddy has the all-wheel drive one. It's extremely stripped down on the inside. It's very basic.
Yeah,
and I think he paid like $25 for it. And it seems capable enough. He put like a $7,000 Go Fast camper on the top. So it's like, well, now you have a $30-something thousand adventure rig, which still isn't, I guess, that bad. But yeah, we didn't talk about those, and we probably should have. Mavericks there need to be more things like that. That's a cool little vehicle.
Well, so about electric vehicles, that is another deep dive. So I don't want to get into a massive discussion about them, but I do want to bring up. So Rivian is based here in Southern California, in Orange County, and they bought this beautiful old historical theater in Laguna Beach, and they have a lot of events there. They have movie nights Thursdays and Saturdays. In fact, Joni went Saturday. I think she might have gone twice last week while I was in Mexico. But they recently held the introduction of their, as you guys probably know, Rivian came out with the R1T truck and the R1S SUV. They're both very expensive. I don't think you can really get them for under $75,000. That's where they start, which is a tremendous amount of money. So they had this new vehicle launch of the R2, and I got to go to it. And it was really cool. It's beautiful. Justin, if he had the money, I know would probably go out and get an R2 as soon as they're available, which I think is 2 years from now. I think first quarter 2026 is when they're looking at deliveries. And I know
that's a long time to preview it and then not
it
have
is
a sale.
It is. And I know that with the first, they had 68,000 orders within the first 48 hours.
Wow.
So get in line.
All of those in Marin County, as far as I can tell, because there are a lot of Rivians around here.
But then they surprised everybody, and they introduced the R3, which is, I don't know what the exact specs are. They didn't give the specs, but it looked like it was maybe like RAV4 size, a little bit smaller than RAV4. But then they introduced the RAV3X, and I posted about it on AJ's Instagram, and we got a ton of response. Like, people were so excited to see a small car, all-wheel drive, electric. And one of the things that I love about Rivian is, like, this company has really hung its hat on adventure. Like, I think its tagline is adventure forever. And so all of these three vehicles, the front seats go flat, as do the back seats. And so they're designed, and RJ, who's the founder and CEO, he's like 6'3" or something like that. And so he wanted to make sure that you can sleep inside. Like, they're built for sleeping inside. So the 3X has tremendous ground clearance, all-wheel drive. It'll have like 350 mile range. It's supposed to start under $45,000, and people are going bonkers for this thing. And it looks sporty. You guys all saw it. I mean, it
looks cool.
I mean, with that and a roof box, and you can do your ground tent, or you can sleep inside, pick your poison. Man, that's where things need to be.
Yeah, that's the thing that excites me about EVs for adventure use is that the fact that it seems like there's probably a future coming where there's like this kind of the universal, maybe not universal, but you like the sort of the skateboard platform, right? You have the batteries on the bottom, you have the motors on each wheel, and you can kind of do whatever you want on top. And it seems like there could be a future where there's a lot of different car companies that are making wildly different concepts for the stuff that goes on top, and maybe there's a world where it can be modular and it can be up to you how you'd build it. I know that company Canoe was doing. I don't even know if they still are around, but they were kind of. They were designing these like vans, but also cab forward sort of trucks, and you could get lots of different sort of designs for it. But it's all based on that flat skateboard sort of system. So to me, that's where the EV could be a really beneficial thing in the adventure world. I still don't think I would get one because of range issues for my own thing. But I like the idea that you could have a lot of different possibilities for the cab or the cabin of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And if people are not aware, pretty much every single electric car, once they're updated, is going to be using the Tesla chargers, which is now called the NACS charger. So Tesla is opening up their superchargers, and honestly, it's not even always the third-party charger availability. It's that they're broken half the time. If you watch car reviewers, the amount of times you actually get the advertised speed on the first try when you pick a random charger is very rare. And so reliability is a huge issue on the charger side. But standardizing the charging port and opening up to Tesla is going to be helpful. But yeah, I mean, that range conversation has been had many times, and hopefully will just continue to improve. For me, it's just the price. I just can't get, even at 45, I just can't get excited about a car.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I mean, I would consider the R3X at 30 grand if I was a 2-person family and that was going to be our only car. Like I would make do with any of my range issues if that was the only car we had, because that's going to be a small part of its life is the adventure side of it. But for a dedicated thing, like I wouldn't replace my truck with one. Not anytime soon. Meaning I wouldn't replace my truck with an EV anytime soon, just because I don't want to have to think about it at all.
Yeah, I mean, having one of each, I mean, there's issues for both. I mean, the difference is that I know that I can probably roll through a rural town at 1 a.m. and find, a self-serve gas station. And I know I'm not going to find that for a charger.
Well, you can carry gas with you. I mean, like that's, when you were talking about going to Mexico, I was thinking about all the times, I'd go down to the wall in Baja, and it's like there was always a guy at one particular spot with a giant gas tank in the back of his truck. And like, obviously there could just be an EV charger there at some point too, but that's not coming anytime soon in Baja, I'm sure. So
I mean, there's electricity more places than there is gas. So like the potential for chargers is actually higher, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
these are early days on the EV side. These are early days. And, the Biden administration just recently announced its more stringent tailpipe emissions. And Toyota, as a big fan of Toyota for their reliability and their design, I've been frustrated to see them dragging. I mean, the only one worse has been Subaru moving forward on, like not meeting my expectations for what they should be doing around EVs. And Toyota has long argued for hydrogen and for hybrid and for other solutions. And the more that we know about EVs, I mean, I think that EVs still on the balance are the future, but they're issues that can't be ignored. The weight is an issue of especially of like big vehicles like the R1 or like the Ford Lightning. Pedestrian deaths in the U.S. are at a 40-year high, I think, and part of it is because of the size and the weight of a lot of these trucks. In Mexico, I drove past not one but 2 new lithium mines that were just like strip mining. It's a new boom down there because of the lithium that's needed in batteries. So you can't ignore those issues. On the other hand, like coming back to like my frankly obsession with trying to have the most responsible vehicle I possibly could, it just doesn't exist, whether it's an EV or that. And this last trip, like I just didn't even look at my gas mileage because I'm doing the best I can throughout my life, and I'm not going to stop living my life. I kind of did that for a while, and I'm not going to stop living my life. One, what any one of us does is only going to have a tiny impact. And two, there are bigger forces at play here conspiring against us. Like I would love a Rivian R1 or R2, but I'm not spending $90,000. I don't have $90,000 to spend on a vehicle. It's offensive to me, the idea of spending 90, and that's what they cost to make. Okay, whatever. But like, those vehicles aren't for me. So
Yeah.
I think that we have to acknowledge that we do our best, and then we need to let go of it.
Yep. I mean, I couldn't agree more.
We've been
So-
taught to feel responsible over it, but not given. But that dependence has been fostered and created for us. Yeah.
Yes,
It's funny. I do feel that way if I'm driving the truck when I don't need to. Like, which is probably good, honestly. Like, there are times where I'm just lazy about taking the girls to school, and I could ride the cargo bike, but it's a little chilly or something. So, and my wife has her car, so all right, I'll drive the 3 miles, or it's not even that round trip to their preschool in the truck. That's when I feel guilty. I never feel guilty about it driving over to a 400-mile drive to Bridgeport. Using two tanks of gas like that. Because that's a calculated sort of thing where I feel like this is the only way I can do this, but it's the every other use of it that I
you've been a big influence on
hurts.
me finally letting go of that sort of obsessive guilt about every time that I drove, and coasting in neutral and hypermiling. And you've said many times to me, I just don't care.
Yeah,
and I think that in my case, it's I can be, I guess obsessive is probably the word.
Well, there's like
on
a self-flagellation too sometimes. With
there is, but I'm just trying to do the right thing, man. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and I think it's a reaction to understanding that there are these forces, these big bad forces in the world, and we all know them. And climate change being one of the biggest, and so I'm trying to do everything I can. But the big picture, yes, that matters. Talking about it with my friends, talking about it through AJ platforms, hopefully inspiring other people to do the best they can. That's really important. But the big picture, I mean, Bill McKibben said this. He's like, yeah, I drive a Nero or whatever, but like, that doesn't matter. Like we need to be putting our pressure on the banks that are lending to oil companies. We need to, try to, be putting pressure on governments and our elected leaders. We need to be doing all that. All that said, like, it's really nice to be in a Tesla driving past a gas station.
Well,
going,
dude,
ha-ha.
I would love it if my truck was a plug-in hybrid. I mean, that's the other. Like, we've been looking for a new family car for a while, and why aren't there more of those? I mean, that's 90% of the time I wouldn't use gas, and then when we go to Yosemite, when we go to Twin Lakes or whatever, then we use gas. That's twice a year. Like the rest of the time, pure EV, and that seems like a wonderful solution that car companies are just not interested in making for some reason. Don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason economically, but
it's two powertrains. I mean, they're really complicated, but I think there's progress there. I mean, some of those electric only ranges are getting up there. I mean, 40 miles all electric.
Didn't you just tell me about a new Mazda engine that was a hybrid?
There's a new Mazda engine that I think it's available in Europe now, and it's coming here. I think they call it I think all the models that use it are called the EX, but it's the old school Mazda rotary motor, but all that does is work as a generator for an electric motor. So it when you're driving, it's all electric, but at certain points when it needs power, it kicks on the little rotary engine that produces power for the motor. And the ranges are like absurdly big. I forget what it is. I watched a couple of YouTube videos, like 700-800 miles or whatever. Like they go for a really long time, and they do use a nominal amount of gas, but it's not very much. And that seems like an interesting technology. But it is also well, it's not really two powertrains. It's just all the gas motor is doing is producing electricity. Which is something that seemed like an obvious thing to me for a while, and I do think that some hybrid engines do kind of work that way a little bit, but it's an interesting solution. But I think it's like the EX30. I think is the first one that you can get here.
And I still think that it's okay to push ourselves a little further too. Like I don't want to spread personal guilt. Like that feeling is awful, of feeling like you're responsible and helpless to do anything about climate change. But there's an overlay on Gaia for road-free areas, and obviously in wilderness you can get away from that too. And I think that we've talked about backpacking, and it's not going to be for everybody, and it's not going to be every trip and all of that, but I'm aware of how I'm never away from cars, and I could probably almost always turn my head and see a car.
Yeah.
And I think that we're talking about adventure, and I think being outside of eyesight and earsight of a car is part of that for me, and it's
Mm-hmm.
why bike or backpacking is going to be what's required, because ultimately if you're car camping, you're bringing the thing with you that you might not want to get away from.
I think that's a really, really good point, Jackson. I mean, a bike is a lot more capable than any 4-wheel drive vehicle ever made. At least maybe not in terms of carrying things, but there's a whole different aspect to adventure that might be just doing less things closer to home. I couldn't agree more. And I actually sort of assume at some point that's where I end up. At a certain point where I'm just maybe I don't really need to even drive out here. I'll just whatever. But I'm not there yet.
Yeah, and it is an excellent point, and we clearly need to be rethinking our relationship with vehicles across the board. Manhattan, there's a bunch of lawsuits, but I think it's supposed to take effect June 1st, a $15 surcharge to come into Manhattan.
Great.
To reduce congestion. And I was just reading something about the Dutch and how they're managing. And kind of ironically, if you want to reduce cars on the roads, you actually make, rather than building wider roads as we do in the US and more roads, you actually make them smaller and make it more difficult to park. And then people will do what's best for people. And so they'll stop driving and they'll stop trying to navigate downtown and to park. And that will end up making things better for bikes and pedestrians anyway. So, I mean, if you go on YouTube and you look at any of these people who are questioning the sort of wisdom of car culture, and it's obviously very different in Europe where you have a lot more public transport than it is here. But especially in the West here, if you're getting outside, like you need a car, you need a vehicle, you just do. And the issue that I often have, and I'm picking up, Jackson, what you're throwing down. The issue I have is like, I feel kind of weird riding my bike when there's like trucks and ATVs going past me. I love to ride my bike, and I do like bike packing. But to be in a place where everybody has had their car, like that diminishes my bike experience or my hiking experience. And so maybe that's just on me to get in other places where there aren't vehicles. But it feels weird to me to be pursuing like a less vehicle centric thing when there's still trucks around me.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think it's not ultimately like the war on cars that I consider myself a part of is not about like I'm going to make huge personal sacrifices. It's about changing, well, what's allowed on this fire road. It's about changing how we're going to incentivize street parking and parking minimums for apartment buildings. And it's super complicated. And on the other side of this, I mean, we're not even talking about the people who get the full-size trucks with the outrageous hoods with no visibility.
Yeah.
And lift it, and people call them like parking lot princesses or something, mall crawlers,
pavement princesses.
Yeah, we're not even talking about that. I mean, that's a huge amount of the trucks around me, and I don't think there's an excuse for that. And I do think I'm not gonna always be nice about needing to do something about this because 40,000 plus people die a year in the U.S. Like. It's a huge problem, but you are right. I mean, the American West is vast and empty, and there's not a lot of other options.
Don't always have 3 weeks to go somewhere. I mean, that's part of it too. Like I can't ride my bike to Sierra. I mean, I could obviously, but
yeah. I read many years ago, like a decade ago, some commenter on IG got in my face about something about sort of this very, very idea. And he's like, "Oh, I live in Salt Lake City and I rode my bike to Zion." I'm like, "Yeah, and you probably are a barista and took a month off or whatever."
Right, exactly.
Not everybody can do that or wants to do that, So, I mean, I think we should wrap it up here. I mean, we're all doing our best, I think, and I guess my sort of takeaway, again, just from my personal experience, this idea of optimization, that there is a perfect thing is really has caused me a lot of dissonance in inability to just relax and enjoy it and be out there. And sometimes I think I spent more time working on the van than I did in the van.
Oh,
And, that's
fun
part of
too.
it, the
Yeah.
fun of it. But, my system now, I have a sleeping bag and I have a pad. I have a kitchen box ready to go. I have a little amazing oyster cooler, and it takes me like 15 minutes to get ready and be out the door. And it's simple and it's modular, and I go and I'm able to get out a lot more. And so I hope you guys have enjoyed this discussion and then takeaway and made you think about it. But in the end, it's not about what you drive, and it's about being out there and enjoying yourself.
You notice how almost every single episode we do, the sort of concluding remarks are really close to like what you would like basically you need to become a Buddhist. It's always just like, you know what, like embrace the moment, like keep it simple, embrace the journey. It's not about nothing, it's not one thing that's going to make you happy. It really is just about, reducing barriers to experiencing the fullness of the moment.
But that's true. The more you know, the less you need.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, I hope you will subscribe to Adventure Journal in print. We put so much of our energy into making a magazine that, it's really more like a quarterly book than a magazine. It's not like anything else out there. And if you listen to this podcast, I know you will love it. And honestly, that's where we make our money. We give you this for free. We give you the stuff on the website for free. We don't have advertising on our website. We don't have advertising on our podcast. We are here because people like you subscribe to AJ in print, and you can go to adventure-journal.com and get it. You can go to subscribe to aj.com and get it. And that is all. Thank you so much. We will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.